You are listening to The Diary of a Wannabe Writer, presented by Richard A. Boxshall, in which I chronicle my life and attempts to become a professional writer by, doing some writing daily, hopefully. Hello, it is Sunday the 11th of August 2024 and you're listening to The Diary of a Wannabe Writer, and those who listen will realise that yesterday I chucked out an emergency podcast. It wasn't for any particular reason, it was purely that I'd had quite a long day and I'd spent the afternoon having sort of a really nice outdoor Korean barbecue thing with some friends, and I just wasn't really in the mood. I wasn't going to do any writing. So I thought, well, I could do a podcast to say, I haven't done any writing today. Or I could just chuck out the pre-recorded emergency podcast. So that's what I did. So, yes, yesterday was pre-recorded, but today's is very much live. Now, I know of a few people who listen, and occasionally I get comments through on the Spotify comments bit. So thank you for those people who have commented. I would like some thoughts if you listen to this in the next day or two. Coming up to show 100. So I've been doing this ludicrous little podcast now since the middle of April. I haven't done it every day, but I'm determined to do it every day this month. And if I do that, on the 17th, it will be the 100th one I've done, which is ridiculous, really, because if they're 6 minutes each, that's 10 hours worth. And actually, some of them have gone over a little bit, so they're not always that short. Anyway, so yes, that's why I didn't do anything yesterday. Today, I've been back in the saddle, as it were. I started work on chapter 34, which is a fairly pivotal chapter. And the other thing I did was I wrote a scene at the beginning of that chapter, which I kind of already knew as I was writing it, should actually go onto the end of the previous chapter. The reason being is that there's a time jump now of a couple of days, and it feels weird to have the chapter begin at the same time as the previous chapter and then have a time jump. Whereas if I put that scene on the end of the previous chapter and then just said the next chapter set 2 days later, that makes more sense. So that's what I've done, and we're about to do some fairly important stuff around Mackenzie. I've just looked at my plan and realised I'm going to have to change something. So the next scene I'm going to have to do is going to be set within the Arboretum, and it's going to be Sayers panicking because he's trapped in there. He's surrounded by Skuld, and so he is going to put the crown on Claire to try and then communicate with the tree to ask for help. Because he's seen that it's wooden figures that are attacking him. So he is going to ask the spirit within the tree if there's anything he can do. But of course, he's been disconnected from the network, so there's going to be bugger all he can do. But anyway, so yeah, that's where I am. The other thing I'm going to talk about briefly is, obviously, I'm interested in music and particularly passionate about British music. Well, for the first time this year, there is a British artist at number one in the UK top 40 charts. It's actually a collaboration with an American artist, but it's Charlie XCX collaborating with Billie Eilish, and they're at number one with a song called Guess. And I have to say, I quite like it. It's a little bit rude, but it's not Cardi B levels of filth. I mean, I found WAP, which I mentioned before, to be really tasteless and yuck, whereas I actually like the current Charlie XCX and Billie Eilish song. So that's cool, but isn't it sad that in a country that used to have such great music heritage, we've got the Beatles, we've got hundreds of acts that I could name. I'm not going to, because I've only got 6 minutes. That hundreds of acts that I could name, and yet this is the first time we've been at number one in our own country, which is a bit sad, I think. And I've nothing against foreign acts, and I do think, there's some wonderful music from around the world, but I just feel that more of our stuff should chart more prominently than it does. That's not saying I have a problem with American acts and Australian acts and whatever's in the charts at the moment. But anyway, so I'm really pleased that a British act is actually at the UK number one top spot, and hopefully it'll be there for a little while. I noticed that the Christmas number one thing is already hotting up. So I know Ed Sheeran is releasing a song around about Christmas time, which is a Christmas song. It's also from a movie soundtrack. So that stands a good chance of doing quite well, given that Ed Sheeran stuff normally shoots in at number one, but then it depends when it's released, because if it's released too far in advance of Christmas, it could end up hitting the top spot and then not being the Christmas number one. It is interesting to note that the last British act that was at number one in this country was the Christmas number one at the end of 2023, but it wasn't a new song, it was George Michael or Wham's Last Christmas. Anyway, so that's me for today. I'm not working until Friday, so I intend to continue working on chapter 34. My original hope was that I would finish chapter 34 whilst I've been away, whilst I was off work. But what with all the work I've had done on my roof and stuff, and things that have been going on, I haven't been able to. But I will continue to write it. I will continue to live stream it, and I'm also trying to mull over the idea of another story for my 60/40 collection, because whilst I don't want to write it this month, I've written the story for this month and put it up on the website. I would quite like to have an idea for next month so I can get that written in September. Anyway, that's me, show 94. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll be back at a similar or same time tomorrow. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. You have been listening to The Diary of a Wannabe Writer, presented by Richard A. Boxall. Thank you for tuning in to my random ramblings, and if you'd like to know more about me or my projects, visit my link tree at linktr.ee/Richard Writes, capital R, capital W. Thank you for listening.